putting down a 4 to 6 inch layer of mulch, you can actually cut your irrigation in those sections by about 50%, or even sometimes more than 50%. So that's an absolute truth and can save you lots of money. And if the state is asking us at this point to try and cut back by 20% this year by adding mulch to an unmulched landscape, could be the perfect way to cut back by 20% without doing anything other than that. So there's a great opportunity right there. Now, we also talked about the main reason that people lose plants in their landscape. And I didn't, you guys all shouted it out all at once. Everybody said overwatering, and that's an absolute truth. We know for a fact through studies that have been done that people lose plants in their landscape because they kill them with kindness. We think that anytime we see a plant that's wilting or drooping a little bit, it needs water. In fact, when you look at a plant, what you need to do is you need to check that soil and make sure that the plant really needs water. The root system could be decomposing or rotting out just because the plant gets too much water. So the effects of too much irrigation are exactly the same as the effects of not enough irrigation. In not enough, you're not supplying the water that the root system needs. In too much, you're rotting out the root system and not allowing it to take in water. So the effects look identical on the plant. So you need to make sure you're checking your soil. You need to make sure that you need to irrigate. One of the worst things that ever happened to landscape in California, or in the country in general, was the introduction of the irrigation timer. Now, irrigation timers, sure, they make your life easy. You don't have to go out and turn the valve. So my life is now simplified. I can spend my time doing other things instead of turning a valve that would have taken me all of about 15 seconds. But in order to turn that valve, you do have to be home. So there is a benefit to a landscape timer system if you're willing to adjust that system on a regular basis. Now, the needs of our landscape plants change throughout the year. They change throughout the seasons. In the wintertime, plants need little or no irrigation. In a normal year, normal rainfall, I normally shut off my irrigation system about the end of October, and I may not irrigate until the 1st of April. This year, however, I've irrigated, since the end of October, I've irrigated 4 times. So we've had an adverse condition where we need to use a little more water to maintain our landscape, so you do that. But you're there, and you're able to adjust it on your own. So don't rely on the timer system itself. You need to make sure that you're willing to change that system as needed. Now, how many people have a moisture meter? Not very many of you. I'll tell you what, for that less than $10 investment in a moisture meter, which is a very simple little tool. It's a 8 or 12 inch probe with a little gauge that says moist, wet, and dry. And when it says wet, you don't need to water. When it says moist, you don't need to water. When it gets down to somewhere between moist and dry, put on a thorough irrigation and let it go back to that point again. So a moisture meter will make you the master of your irrigation system, as long as you're willing to change the timer to reflect your needs during the season. So you don't need to water as much in the winter, if any at all. In the spring, you're going to start to water a little bit as plants start to grow out, break dormancy, and grow and flower. In the summer, you're going to water more. That's when the plants need the water. That's when they're using the irrigation most readily, when they're in a growth pattern. And in the fall, you start to slack off again. So I'm not going to tell you how you should deliver water. I'm not going to tell you the best shrub head or spray head or drip irrigation or drip tape. However you choose to deliver water is going to work for you. If you take a little sprinkler and put it on the end of your hose and go set it under the tree and turn it on, that's going to do the job. You can irrigate in any way that makes sense for you. You can spend as little as you want or as much as you want on an irrigation system. But the most important consideration is making that system fit a schedule that is needed. Go by plant needs, not by just setting a timer. Now, I like to walk in the mornings, and I walk around my neighborhood, and 5:30, 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning, you start to see all these irrigation systems come on. And about 2 weeks ago, we had a really nice rain, and I had a little break on Saturday morning when it wasn't raining. And I thought, I'm going to go out and walk a little bit. I counted 9 systems in one block that were irrigating at 7 o'clock in the morning on a rainy Saturday. So no wonder we don't have enough water in the state of California. We're all running it down the curb. If I was willing, or if I was able to harvest that water and make use of that water, I'd never have to pay an outdoor water bill again. I have more water than I ever knew what to do with. So understand your irrigation system, understand how it works, and understand the irrigation needs of your plants. When do they need to be watered? How much do they need to be watered? Don't water to the point of runoff. If you have runoff, then you need to adjust the system or set the system to come on as a pulse, where you can run it for 10 minutes and shut it off and run it an hour later for another 10 minutes. As soon as you see runoff, that system is wasting water. So make sure to adjust your systems. Make sure to water by plant needs and not by a timer. Now, the nice thing is the new systems today are all based on one of two things. They're based on a weather recommendation system, which tells us approximately how much water we would need for each day or for each cycle, or they're based on a tensiometer system, which is going to tell us the exact condition of the soil that we're going to irrigate. So a tensiometer is the same type of a gauge as that little moisture meter. It just registers the amount of moisture in the soil. And when it goes down to that point where it's almost dry, it irrigates, and then it waits to go back to that point again. Problem with those systems, right now they're pricey. You know, you can go to any big box store and buy a 5 or 6 station timer for $69. But you put in a system with a tensiometer, it's going to cost you $700 or $800. The nice thing is, that's 1/3 the price that they were 5 years ago. So, like anything in technology, the price is coming down. So if you're going to put in a new system, try and put in a system that's based on weather station data or based on a tensiometer system. It's going to irrigate smarter for you. If you're not putting in a new system, just be willing to adjust that timer or be willing to go out there and turn those valves yourself to irrigate when you need to irrigate and not overwater. That's the best advice I can give you on irrigation. Any questions? Yes?
Checking moisture in potted plants.
Moisture meter. Same thing. Nice probe. 8 to 12 inches. You go right down into that pot in 3 or 4 different locations. Read that averaged read on the gauge and irrigate as
All
you
the
need to.
good ones are
You
the
can
big
also,
ones, though. Like the little ones just don't seem to work very well.
the moisture meter that I'm using right now, I bought at a yard sale for $1. I've had it for 20 years.
That's the good one.
No, it's not a good one. It probably cost $3 when it was brand new. And you don't need a technological piece of equipment for this. All you need is that simple gauge. It's really one of the most simplest things you can buy. And you can go to any retail nursery today and buy the best one on the market for less than $10. So make that investment. Don't worry if it's off a little bit. I don't care. It's not that big a deal. I'm not measuring down to little tiny micrometers. All I need to know is whether the soil's dry or wet. Hey, if you don't like a moisture meter, stick your finger in it. That'll tell you whether it's wet or dry. Take out a little sample. Take out a little plug. That'll tell you what the soil's like. The concept, the most important thing is water smart. Don't water because the system's on a timer. Water smart. Anything else? Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about fertilizing. Now that we're mulching and we're irrigating right, fertilizer always comes into play. There are a lot of elements in our soils that we don't have. Mulch is going to help to provide a lot more of those elements, or let's say make those elements readily available to the plant's needs and the plant's ability to uptake those elements and use them properly. So mulch will give you better ability to do that. You've got lots of options on the fertilizer market today. We've got hundreds of varieties on the fertilizer market today. Everything from complete organics to partial organics to full-blown chemical fertilizers. And you can use anything and everything you want. The tree's going to take it up in a form that's readily available to the tree or the plant or the rose or the tomato. So, as much as I like to be an organic grower, I'm not 100% organic. I can never claim to be 100% organic. But I have a couple of granddaughters, and I have a couple of dogs and a cat, and my wife and I spend a lot of time in the yard, and you know what? I'm perfectly comfortable being 95% organic. So if I have to use something that's a chemical product occasionally, which I really try not to do, I'm not intimidated by doing that, knowing that I'm using it properly. So whatever type of fertilizer you want to use, by all means use it. Watch your timing. Timing is really important, and the total amount of nitrogen that you're putting on is the greatest concern. Nitrogen, to me, at this point, nitrogen's okay for the lawn. I want to keep the lawn nice and green. But when it comes to my vegetable garden, my herbs, my fruit trees, my palm collection, my Japanese maple collection, my wife's rose garden, nitrogen at this point is my enemy. Nitrogen does what for us? Leaves, growth, vigor. Remember what I want. I want a managed landscape. I want my fruit trees this high. So the more nitrogen I put on, the more I have to use these. And I love these. I use them all the time, but I don't want to have to go out and do that all the time. Too much irrigation and too much nitrogen do two things for us when we want fruit and flowers. They take away from that. Too much irrigation, too much nitrogen will cause the plant to grow vigorously. So it's growing faster than it would normally grow in nature. It's growing faster and it's more susceptible to disease, insect, all kinds of other problems, bacterial problems, fungal problems, you name it. So nitrogen, when nitrogen is in play and growing vigorously, we get lots of green growth and we get little development of root structure and little development of fruiting and flowering wood. So the more nitrogen you use and the more water you use, the less fruit and flowers you can expect. So irrigation management and nitrogen management are absolutely critical when it comes to growing good quality fruits, vegetables, and a maintained landscape. Now, another thing that nitrogen will do for you, if you have that mulch layer down and you're irrigating properly and you've developed that really nice mycorrhizal activity in your soil, as you throw on that bag of sulfate of ammonia, if you get down close to the ground and listen closely, you can hear billions of mycorrhizas screaming in agony as they die from all that nitrogen that you just threw on the soil. So too much nitrogen will take out your bioactivity much, much faster than you can reestablish it. So watch the nitrogen. Most important thing, watch the nitrogen. Make sure the fertilizer that you're using for your fruiting plants and your flowering plants, nitrogen should be the lowest number on the bag. Look for something that's like a 3-12-12. I want higher P and K, much higher, 3 or 4 times higher on the P and K than I want on the nitrogen. And I want something that's a humic acid base that'll work in balance and harmony with my mulch layer. So low N, high P and K, humic acid base. Look for a few trace elements, zinc, iron, manganese. Those things are important in very, very small numbers. So the fortunate thing is there's 50 great products on the market that are following that philosophy now. They're a little more expensive because they're not just using the cheapest item to supply, which is nitrogen. But if nitrogen's the biggest number on the bag, then avoid it. You know, if you want your lawn to look good, fine. You want heat, you want fruit, you want vegetables, you want beautiful flowers, stick to the low nitrogen. Feeding time is extremely important. You want to feed when the plant needs the food. So you want to start right about the end of January. Everything's kind of waking up, deciduous trees are getting ready to bloom, and the roses are getting ready to start to pop out. Things are starting to come out of their winter dormant period. So end of January is a great time to start. Get a feed on then. You can feed maybe mid-season, about mid-April if you want. Early April, mid-April, and then one more time, at least these 2 times, at least end of January and end of June. That end of June feeding will take them right on through summer and into fall. Don't feed after the end of June, period. So you've got a 6-month period, end of June to end of January, when you shouldn't be feeding your landscape at all. Now, if you feed during that period, the best analogy that I can make is that's like going to Starbucks at 11 p.m. and buying the Venti Frappuccino with an extra shot of espresso and drinking that down and then going home and thinking, I'm going to go to sleep now. Well, you're feeding your tree late in the season when the tree needs to shut down and go into dormancy. You're feeding it. You're giving it coffee at 11 p.m. and expecting to go dormant. It doesn't want to do that. It's tough enough to get things to go in dormant in California anyway, to get them to shut down at the right time of the year. So feeding at the wrong time of year just adds to that. That's what causes early off-season bloom. That's what makes trees come into bloom in December or January, is that nitrogen or that fertilizer too late in the season, so they go into a soft dormancy. They don't want to shut down. If you want a good night's sleep, you make sure you don't drink caffeine late. The only time I drink that big Starbucks is if I'm going to make my drive home from Northern California and I'm leaving at 8 o'clock at night. I know I have to drive for 6 hours. First thing I do, Starbucks drive-through line, big cup of caffeine, and I'm good. I'm good for the whole drive home. In fact, I'm usually up later than that. So your trees go through the same thing. Your trees' year is like our day. They wake up in January like we would wake up in the morning. We go to work and they would do their flowering and set their fruit. We come home and start to relax a little bit in the afternoon. Tree's going to start to shut down after its harvest, and at night we go to bed. Tree goes dormant. So that year period that the tree follows is kind of like our day. So think of it that way. You want to feed when the tree needs the food or the plant needs the food. You don't want to feed when you want to shut it down. It's hard enough to get things to go dormant in Southern California as it is. Feeding at the wrong time of year will only promote soft dormancy and growth at the wrong time of year. So nothing. End of June, end of January. Nothing. Exception, container plants. Anything in a pot you can feed right up until about October. And then shut it down November, December, January. Any questions on feeding? Yes?
Like many of us, I live in a development where all the topsoil was stripped off when the house was built. So I wanted to plant some citrus trees. So I wanted to build up the soil on top of the hardening. The only soil that I can get is either amended soil by the truckload or bales of soil in a big box store. Everything I've read, to include our trip to Irvine, says you always just plant with native soil. I don't have native soil.
Sure you do. You're looking at native soil and considering that when you do your planting, I don't know if that's. You're thinking of this. You're thinking of digging a hole and planting to grade in that hole. But what you really want to do when you have heavy soil is you want to dig that hole only half as deep, and you want to plant up above that and mound up to it.
That's what I've done. However, the mound up part of it, I can only find amended soil.
No, use your native soil.
I don't have enough at this point to fill in those areas. It's only about 3 inches deep. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, I recommend native soil for raised beds and all those things all the time, because what you're doing is you're bringing the root crown up above the point of saturation. It's going to stay wet down here, but this area here, this area can oxygenate. The water can get away from that. Even if it's native soil, it was hard when you dug it up, but you know what? The water still gets away and goes back down to grade. So you're creating an area that's going to oxygenate well. And then by incorporating your mulch, you can mulch right up and leave a little area around your tree, so you're giving it an area where you're going to start to get some breakdown of that soil. That mulch is going to help to break down that soil.
What's the disadvantage of the amended soil? Too much?
There's really no disadvantage. I mean, you could use that if you wanted to, but you probably want to mix it with as much native soil as you could. 50-50 or 2/3 native, 1/3 amended. You can definitely use it. I mean, that's what we use in the nursery industry all the time. We don't plant native soil. We plant in a container, so we're planting in a mix that drains well. So we have to have the amendments in that soil. So in a situation like what you're doing, all you want to make sure that you're doing is you're creating an area where it can oxygenate. You want that area above grade where that water can get away. That's the most important concern, by far.
Thank you.
Yes?
The fertilizing you just talked about, if it's a first season, just planted bare root tree, do you still fertilize it?
You're not going to fertilize a first season planted bare root tree until you have 4 to 6 inches of new growth. Start at that point. Yeah, you don't want to feed a tree that doesn't have the ability to take up the nutrients yet. When you see a little vigorous flush of growth, you know the root system is active. So that's, you don't want just a couple flowers and a little tiny leaf. You want some vigor, some growth. Okay, one more.
You mentioned mix. What about containers? Is there a good mix for containers that you would say? Just something that drains well.
That blueberry handout gives you a great container
okay.
mix. If it's something that doesn't need as much acid, you can replace the peat moss with sandy soil or something like that. So just make sure drainage is critical. Drainage is the most important thing for container plants. That's what the nursery industry considers. You can supplement anything else you want, but you can't supplement drainage. If it doesn't drain, it's going to die. So drainage is by far the most important consideration. Okay, let's talk a little bit about pest control. Diseases, insects, all those things. We're irrigating right, we're mulching right, we're feeding right. One of the things you're going to notice at this point is that insect issues and bacterial issues and disease issues don't come into play as much as they did before. If you're overwatering and over-fertilizing with nitrogen, disease problems are run rampant. If you're irrigating right and mulching right, you have the bioactivity in your soil, insect and disease issues at that point are minimal. And we live in a climate where they're minimal anyway. I don't know whether you guys realize how lucky you are to be here in Southern California, where we don't have the same issues that they have in Brownsville, Texas, or Southern Florida, and some of these southern states and some of the areas back, South Carolina and areas like that, disease issues and insect issues out there are horrendous. Out here, it's like those people come out here and they go, so what? You got a few aphids. So what? You got a little peach leaf curl. You have to deal with it for a couple of months out of the year. We deal with it 9 months out of the year. Southern California is the greatest climate to grow in that there is. So if you're irrigating right, mulching right, and you're feeding right, you're going to have a minimal presence of disease and bacterial issues and insect issues. But what you do have, you want to make sure you're controlling. The most important weapon in my arsenal for disease and insect control right now is a hose and a high-pressure nozzle. Keep your plants clean. During the summer months, when the dust settles on everything, the cobwebs build up, the dead leaves build up in them, keep them clean. Keep that dead wood cut out, keep that moisture on there. Make sure once a month, once every 3 or 4 weeks, that you go through with that hose and that high-pressure nozzle from May through October and keep those plants clean. Keep all that nasty stuff hosed out. That's going to control 90% of your creepy crawly insects. So scale, mealybug, aphid, spider mites, things like that. You have ease of control just by keeping the plants clean. Those insects move relatively slow. So if you go through every few weeks and do that, you're going to catch anything before it becomes an infestation. You're going to be able to keep those plants clean. Then, and only then, if you have an issue, maybe Asian citrus silver, maybe citrus leaf miner. Those are big issues nowadays, and they're starting to pop up in all kinds of different places. So the most important thing there is, do you understand that insect? Do you know exactly what it is? Is it an insect? Do you see the insect? Or is it just damage? If it's just damage and you don't know what caused the damage, the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out where that damage came from. So what I want you to do at that point is take a Ziploc baggie, take some fresh samples of the damage. If the insect is present or you think the disease is present, take fresh samples of that, put them in the bag, seal the bag. This is a great place to bring it. You've got all kinds of knowledge in this room. You can get your problems identified here, or take it to a retail nursery that you trust and work with somebody that understands pest problems. There are diseases out there that look like insect damage, and there are insect damages that look like diseases. Citrus leaf miner, for example, looks like a fungal disease. If you don't know it's an insect, you'd never guess it was an insect. Shot hole fungus on prunus looks like it's been a bunch of bugs chewing on the leaf. It looks like insect damage. So you need to understand that. You need to know exactly what you're dealing with before you use any type of control method. So keep the plants clean, get your problems identified, and then always look for the organic alternative. Same thing like fertilizers. There are so many different organic pest control products on the market now. I can go into any retail nursery with an issue, get it identified, and they can say, yeah, okay, you can use this chemical or that chemical. I can use the ortho systemic spray for citrus, or I can use spinosad, which is an OMRI registered organic, which is going to control the citrus leaf miner organically, or the psyllid organically, where I can spray today and eat fruit tomorrow, because I know that product is OMRI registered. It's completely organic. It's not a chemical product. I'm always looking for the organic alternative. We have more organic alternatives on the market now than we have ever had in this industry for the last 100 years. So make sure you're using those. Now, if you're going to use any kind of a spray, whether it's an organic spray or a chemical spray for a fungus, for a disease, for any type of issue, and you think, okay, it's gotten beyond a point where I can control it with my bioactive mulch layer and my high pressure nozzle, I need to do a treatment. What I want you to do is I want you to be safe. I want you to make sure that anything you're applying, anything you're putting on, you're being as safe as you possibly can. Wear protective clothing. Wear long pants, wear some boots, wear a long sleeve shirt, wear a hat, wear gloves, wear eye protection, wear a respirator or a mist mask. Make sure you're going to look like an alien out there in your yard for a few minutes, but you're going to get the job done safely. Use the product by label instructions. All those products now have a label that's going to be 8 or 10 pages long. They're going to give you every recommended dosage, every proper usage, all the different types of combinations of that spray that you can use. That's ammunition in your arsenal right there. You need that information to be successful. Make sure you're using those products properly. So get your problem identified. You'll always look for the organic alternative. When you have to spray, be safe. I remember when I was a kid, my mom and dad had about 5,000 or 6,000 square feet of the most beautiful dichondra lawn you could ever want to see. I mean, their landscape was fantastic. It could have been the cover of Sunset Magazine, any issue. And my mom was out there with tweezers, picking spurs and oxalis out of the lawn. And every summer, about August, when the humidity was up and the daytimes were hot and the night times were warm, they would get flea beetle in the dichondra. The flea beetle starts chewing on the lower stems and the roots, and you start losing plants, and you start to get dieback areas. And so my dad, he was the chemical guy. He would go out and do the spray. And I remember as a kid just thinking to myself, this can't be good. You know, here's my dad, shorts and a tank top and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth with a glass jug sprayer with DDT out there, you know, spraying that around. I'm just thinking, man, that can't be good for you, you know. And fortunately, my dad's still around today. He's still healthy and still doing real well. He hasn't sprayed DDT in probably 40 years. That's a good thing. But don't do that. That's ridiculous. That's insane to do something like that. Be safe. Make sure you're doing everything by label instruction. Make sure you're paying attention to that label. 1 ounce on the label doesn't mean 4 ounces in the jar. Make sure you're following those instructions. Make sure you're safe. When you're done spraying, clean your equipment, put it away. Go in the garage, take off your clothes, throw them in the wash, put them on a double rinse cycle. Don't wash them with your kids' pajamas or your wife's nightgown on their own. Take that same set of clothes and hang it up and put them away so that next time you need them, you can use the same clothes again. Keep them clean, be safe, follow label instructions, get your problems identified. Never, ever compromise yourself when you're spraying any kind of a product or using any kind of a fertilizer or thing in the landscape. Make sure you're as safe as you possibly can be. Any questions on that? It's pretty simple, isn't it? When you think about it.
I have a quick question. Would you ever pre-treat if you have, like I get leaf miner every single year on my citrus, and somebody told me just to spray when the buds are coming out because they started.
Well, leaf miner is only active when nighttime temperatures are above 65.
Okay.
So that's when it's going to start to reproduce. So if you want to do a preventative spray, when the nighttime temperatures are consistently in the 60s, go ahead and do a preventative spray. But I don't really do preventative sprays. You know, I mean, exception. Copper sprays for dormant disease control on prunus and on apples for apple scab. So leaf curl, powdery mildew, yeah, I'll do a dormant spray for that. I know that's a preventative spray. But for an insect problem, I don't know whether I'm going to get it or not. So I'm not going to spray until I see it.